Hey, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I have the great pleasure of having Sam T. Moss, who is the founder and creator of Youth Group Chronicles. So Sam, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. I appreciate you inviting me on the show.
Absolutely. So Sam, give us a little bit about you. How did you first give us kind of your faith journey, and then how that faith journey has played into the Youth Group Chronicles?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've grown up in a Christian home. So I was born and raised into church. Just looking back, I don't really remember missing a lot of Sundays. It was just very ingrained in our family to be there and to be a part of the church family and even in ministry. So I got involved in ministry very, very young. I believe 8 years old. I was on the worship team playing drums, so super young. And my parents, they lived at a Christian youth camp in northern Pennsylvania. That experience, as well as living at a youth camp, kind of sparked the idea to be like, man, I've heard a lot of stories, not necessarily my stories, but I've heard other people have stories. And man, someone should start a podcast. So to start, it was just myself and a co-host. Our church was very gracious to let me use their studio. Since then, we've been able to grow and purchase our own equipment. But to start out, it was really cool. We had a few cameras we just set up. Wasn't the best shots, wasn't the best angles. It was just like a conversation style. And then it grew into bringing on more guests. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned is that just because you're starting small doesn't mean you can't grow it into something, for one, and two, just continually improve one thing. We didn't have to have this perfect studio to start. We just had to get the content out there. Audio wasn't perfect. It was echoey. Lighting, crap. But looking back, you have to start somewhere, and that's perfectly okay.
I think the big thing that I value as a network, and I feel that you as the host of Youth Group Chronicles, is just this idea that we are not alone. In ministry, just in general, it's so easy to just feel like, man, I've just messed this up. I'm the only one who's ever done this. What have you gotten back from other youth pastors or ministry leaders in response to the podcast that you've had throughout the years?
So when I initially started this, the goal was this was not planned to be a ministry or even an encouragement at all. What's cool is it's kind of morphed into both of those things, and you hit the nail on the head. I've had people reach out to me and say, one guy specifically said, hey, here's some stories for you. Honestly, I don't care if you use these on the podcast. It's literally just therapy for me to get these out to other youth pastors. And I think just like you said about like, man, other people are making these same mistakes. That is very true, to know that one, you're not alone, because it can be like you're on an island. And two, it's humor is great. It is comic relief to know that it's okay to laugh at another mistake and know that, man, that literally could have been us at our youth group. One thing I've learned though is that I will read a story and I'm like, man, how does someone top this story? And then 2 weeks later, I'll get another email and it will just blow that story out of the water. I'm like, how do these stories keep coming in? What are you guys doing? But again, it just goes back to the humor component. And I think it's one of the things that's really missing in the church culture, for one, but even more narrow than that, the youth group and the youth ministry culture. I think we need to laugh more. It's medicine, if you ask me. We'll do one story, right? For example, there was a recent one about a youth pastor absolutely ruining Santa for a kid. And this is like a teenager too. And then it almost sparks everyone's memory. And then you'll get like an absurd amount of like Santa stories, and they're all very similar. So it's like the ebbs and flows of these categories of content. It's very funny to watch like the stories come in after a podcast is released. The special guests I have on Youth Group Chronicles, absolute shout out to them, because they're the real reason that the show is doing so well.
You know, we all make mistakes, and one thing you guys are very clear about every show is the gospel is presented, but really able to interweave the gospel with just a crazy happening. Does anything stick out in your mind? There was
one, it was actually like a miracle that happened. And there was a story about this lady come up and tried to shoot their pastor, the youth pastors, like legit. And somehow the bullet never hit him, even though she was pointing at him. And then I believe they found a hole in the wall behind where he was standing or something like that. And then when the cops found her, the gun was still warm, or they just didn't find the bullet, one or the other, but it definitely went off and she was pointing it. So that, I mean, God spared its life, which was an incredible miracle. And it was like an actual, like, we laugh on the podcast, but there's moments where it's like, wow, like, man, that's actually deep. And that's probably the best example I have of that happening. And it is cool to see those kind of stories come in. And I think that what's cool is people outside of the Christian world, one, love the content. I've had people literally tell me, they're like, man, my non-Christian unsaved kids listen to your show. There was a lady that goes to our church. She's like, I couldn't believe it. She's like, she knows a couple of your co-hosts and she's listening to your podcast. So that right there is like another ministry opportunity.
And what might be next for Youth Group Chronicles?
The biggest thing that we are looking at right now and promoting is doing live events and live recordings. So basically, a church, they would host us and bring us in just like you would like an artist or a speaker. And then we would go on stage, sit down and record an episode with a live audience. And then we would use that content. We'd put it on the podcast as an episode, but they get to be in the audience for all the jaw-dropping crazy stories. They get to experience them first and in person.
And for all of my youth pastors, ministry partners, give us the rundown. If they have a short story, how do they share that with you? How do they listen? What platforms are you on? And also share with us your website.
Yeah, so Youth Group Chronicles is available wherever you listen to podcasts. We also just started a YouTube channel and we are slowly uploading some content there. So we have full video episodes. But yeah, the podcast is on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever it is that you listen. If you have a story that you want to submit to the show, though, you can send it to stories@ygcpodcast.com. And then our new website is ygcpodcast.com. You can find out info about events. We have merch. You can find out information about the podcast itself. It's all right there. So that's probably the best place to go.
Make sure to check out Youth Group Chronicles. There'll be links in the bio section below. If you have a story, please send that in to Sam. You can also send us anonymously, right?
Yes, that is true. We do honor that. I've almost messed up a couple of times reading a name, but then I'll stop. We haven't fully slipped up to this point yet. So if you want to remain anonymous, that's perfectly fine as well.
And guys, just remember, as we are intentional about sharing the gospel, remember we are all broken. We all mess up, but we have a God that can take anything and use it for his glory. We're just his vessels. And when we look back, sometimes it can be funny and it can be amazing. So thank you so much, Sam, for allowing me to talk to you. And thank you for just the ministry that you have.
Thanks so much. I appreciate you inviting me. It's been great to be here.